Sonic Universe Issue 20. We started with Bunny being revealed to not be knocked unconscious yet again from the robot fist, so that's a convenient relief. Then when I finally bothered to read the name of the mad scientist, I should really be paying more attention in life, I realized that even the making fun of his name being hard to pronounce is stupid forced comedy. I thought from people saying foo and fu or whatever a bunch of times in a row, that his last name would include more than just one F, and that this was the whole problem. Instead, his name is Fukurikov. How is that hard to pronounce? Fukurikov. Is this just another Sahasrala situation where people think it's hard and it's not in the slightest, and exaggerate that for a joke? This isn't funny though, and Antoine, of all people, has some nerve making fun of the pronunciation as unmanageable. First of all, he's not the best at pronouncing himself, and second, he knows 2 languages, so you'd think that'd make him way better at figuring out how to pronounce a word that's said to him outright. It's not like it's written down. Tails says while dodging a laser from the robot that he needs Bunny to blind it for a minute. Finally, taking advantage of that concept again, we haven't seen robots be blinded since the Sally miniseries, though there was a creative way to get around the fact that those characters were incapable of actually fighting, while Bunny is more than capable. I guess I'm supposed to believe here that her laser isn't able to damage the robot on its own, so it has to blind it. She says that this will only buy them a few seconds for some reason, talking as if she knows that for absolute certainty. And also, wouldn't this amount of seconds that she spent talking immediately get rid of their time? Tails tells Antoine and Bunny to hit the weak spots, and Tails will attack the whole mech. Bunny asks how he can take that thing by himself. First off, almost by himself. That was weird dialogue. Second, I'm guessing Bunny proving her laser won't damage it is proof that she really isn't the strongest at this specific fight, leaving it up to Tails. Suddenly, out of nowhere, it's revealed that Tails was carrying a wrench with him the whole time that is way too big to possibly have been hidden by either of them. This would have been fine if he had been wearing clothes with pockets like a lab coat, or if we saw him finding the wrench. Instead, not only does he inexplicably have a wrench now, but he also apparently took the bombs from those bombs, and stored them in T-Pup 2 off-screen. Off-screen, mind you, off-screen! That's always a cheap excuse to ask for something to get the heroes out of a corner. I could understand storing a few bombs, though I doubt something that small and compact would have much free space in him that's not wiring or whatever to store bombs, unless they were all in his tiny mouth. But the wrench? Really? I was expecting him to fight the robot without either of those tools, since he didn't have them in any of the previous panels. Although him fighting it with a wrench and bombs makes way more sense to realistically work, but there's still a Deus Ex Machina. And it just now dawned on me that the wrench and bombs are a reference to the items he used in Tails' Adventure, which I played fully a couple days ago on the 3DS alongside Super Mario Land 2 at the time of this typing, so it's not like I forgot. But wrenches and bombs are such generic tools, bombs because of Zelda, that I didn't get that they're supposed to have been justified to coming out of nowhere by being items in Tails' Adventure. Like almost every other concept in the comic, this wasn't doomed from the start. This would have been solved if 1. We saw him actually getting the wrench, and 2. He was wearing a pouch or backpack the whole time that would justify him having some kind of room for items. Plus the wrench is gigantic. It looks bigger than his torso. That'd have to be a big backpack. And it's not like in the reboot where Hope can't change his design. He can't wear any clothes he doesn't wear in the holy games. He had no excuse not to have a backpack on a trip to a tropical island, especially since Bunny and Antoine were wearing different clothes for the occasion. As T-Pup shows the schematics of the base, taking on the same role as Nicole does as a do-anything AI out of plot convenience, Tails tells Bunny to fly to higher regions, while Antoine's sword is apparently going to be strong enough to cut through to groups of cables in the walls of the base. Look, I love the idea that Antoine's sword is worth something and can slice through things like I'd expect, but the entire comic up to this point had shown his sword to be incapable of damaging robots, particularly in Khan's introduction. And it took Patch to show us otherwise. You can't change one of the fundamental rules of the comic for no reason that easily. At least here it's justified as the new sword here maybe being way stronger than Antoine's. But if so, he better replace his sword with it in battle. Sentimental value or not, there's no excuse to go to battle with a weaker sword. Immediately, the fortress gets damaged by an explosion, as the mad scientist crazily thinks that they're being tactless when they're obviously being the opposite. First, he doubts robotization exists, and now this. Oh, now we see them carry out Tails' plan. I thought we skipped past it arbitrarily because we saw a panel of him saying they're destroying his base. Tails gets grabbed by a giant hand, being called an arrogant brat. Well, considering how Ken Pontac Tails acts, and how Tails really needed to get over himself in this arc sometimes and show humility, I actually enjoyed seeing him being called arrogant here. He's right. For some reason, when Tails throws his wrench at the robot's exterior, and it clearly doesn't break anything off it, or hit and twist bolts at all, the robot is destroyed anyways. I agree with him, that was inconceivable. Oh, this doesn't sound too mean-spirited, but with him winning so effortlessly, it comes off as a fanfiction that Tails wrote about himself. I guess he's using his super strength from when he uprooted a tree? And that makes it all the more frustrating that he's portrayed as wrong by the completely clueless, not self-aware at all writing of a story arc that was made of inconceivable. Like, again, no one's saying that he's using super strength to throw it really hard. Then Tails learns from Noise that the robot had a pilot in it the whole time. That came out of nowhere. Tails lifts up the head of the robot to help the coughing Speedy, who maybe should have fought Tails himself since he was doing so well last time, but then again he would have been up against Bunny too. Tails picks the dazed Speedy up and flies with him, showing compassion, asking which way to the medical bay. And after all the time Speedy called him a freak, insulting him worse than almost anyone in the comic. This is the kind of Tails I want to see constantly, not generic insufferable genius Tails. I get the point that he's gotten more confident from growing up, but for one thing, growing up doesn't magically change your personality like that, and two, it's not likable to me at all. The whole appeal to his personality is that he's a genius kid who's humble and compassionate, not an annoying cliche. In a sweet moment I wouldn't expect of a one-dimensional villain that calls him a freak, Speedy says, "Nice moves back there, kid." I'm expecting him to attack him like a jerk right after this because that'd be bad writing. But instead, my first instinct was correct and he shakes Tails' hand. Unfortunately, it's even worse writing than I thought, as when Tails said sweetly that he can look past the insults from earlier and they can at least try to be friends, Speedy attacks him out of nowhere, calling him a freak again, and tells his friends and him to scram. At first I thought there was some really good writing where the villain showed depth for once, showing gratitude, even if it came out of nowhere with no foreshadowing. And then because I saw this, it felt like total bullshit that he acted this way right afterwards. At least the scene showed that Tails is a good, sweet, naive kid, but that kind of thing should really happen more often, be like his main character flaw or something. Then I would have seen this coming better because it would have happened more often. He sees T-Pub whining and damaged, a barely noticeable amount, and Tails compassionately pets him, saying that he'll get him fixed up in no time. They decide to escape the base, and Tails leads Antoine and Bunny to push through the panicking army of battlebirds rather than fly over them, and somehow this works without them getting pushed down or punched and trampled or anything, because we need yet another convenience. Do I have to do the in-your-face gag again? Tails presses some buttons on a control panel saying he'll take them down if they hop on. And after a terrible attempt at a joke in response to that, the elevator they're in goes down when Antoine wants it to go up. Bunny shows faith that Tails knows what he's doing, and then when the elevator fails, she says amusingly angry, or rather Tails better know what he's doing. Is there really so little time that Tails can't explain himself to Antoine while working at the same time? Tails says they'll fly the rest of the way, leading them to an underground area with a bunch of water. Bunny asks amusingly, "Have you lost your ever-loving mind?" It's nice that she is questioning the arrogant brat, but somehow I think that he's going to be proven right. Antoine reminds him that they're under an island, so they might be both buried and drowned at the same time. Then Tails says that it's a fake island and waits for the wall to collapse, revealing that they're actually up, letting them fly out of the rising metal fortress safely. Tails explains that he figured out that the island was a flying metal fortress from the schematics he got. Bunny compliments Tails because he only looked at them for 2 minutes at most. No, I'm pretty sure it's just plot convenience. I mean, the schematics didn't show him sky and clouds around the base, how would he know? He could maybe see the outside of something in it that could lift it, but the schematics didn't seem to show any rockets or anything, just a map of the base. This would have been accomplished better if they saw it out of a window or something. Maybe if they commented that the floor was rising beneath them, which they should have noticed at some point. At least Tails looks bashful to compliment. Meanwhile, the Battle Lord yells at Speedy that the next time a freedom fighter shows up, he wants to know about it. This is kind of dark considering that Speedy's supposed to be his own son. The mad scientist is put in charge of rebuilding, and the boss says it's about time they rounded up the Babylon rogues. That sounds pretty interesting. He claims that at full strength they will cast off the Eggman Empire just to try to replace it and plot against Tails, which is never going to happen because that would have been interesting. What's especially intimidating about the army is that their minions aren't robots, so the heroes have to hold back against them. Is that why Eggman's switching to using Dark Legionnaires a lot when robots don't require food, water, or toiletries? It'd be nice if Eggman explained that as his whole reasoning behind it, instead of looking like he's just using weaker minions, because really the minions aren't weaker if the heroes are forced to hold back against them to avoid being murderers, and therefore are making themselves weaker against them. At that point, the organic thing just becomes an advantage. Speedy tells his boss with a smile what Tails' name is, implying that he actually had grown fond of Tails, and he was just being a tsundere to save face, though he didn't need to call him a freak while he was at it. This gets him in trouble because his father has a hair-trigger temper, when he really should be thanking him for giving him intelligence on the enemy. I hope his boss ends up getting overthrown and provoking mistreatment-induced betrayal, because he's the most dysfunctionally temperamental boss ever, even more than Eggman sometimes. This is not how a smart villain conducts himself with his minions. But of course, Speedy's not going to betray him, because that would have been interesting. Then we see the airship of the Babylon rogues flying towards the battle fortress. Wave says that they're venting fuel and dropping debris. Wave complains that someone beat them to the punch, implying that the rogues are going to attack their old army themselves despite only being 3 people with 1 airship, and Jet says that nobody touches the relics of Babylon but them, seeming to be plotting against Tails and his friends. Meanwhile, back at the cabin, Antoine says that he's liking the sword, but then says he'll start collecting instead. You idiot! That's way better than the one you use for battle, and you're just gonna ignore it? And Tails is putting brown slop into a cup for Teapup to eat, even though he's a robot, but then he drinks from that same cup like it had hot cocoa all along. What kind of art inconsistency is that? Was he feeding Teapup or drinking from the cup? Why didn't his friends point that out? And then Tails could have justified it with him being sleep deprived, or not paying attention, which would have been a joke that actually worked. Oh boy. This issue was by Ian Flynn. I love the experience of reading this arc. I liked its originality as a Tales Adventure adaptation, having Bunny and Antoine factored into the plot the way they did. Funny in a creative way, but it really runs off plot conveniences. There's only so many times I can type down conveniently and out of nowhere before I start to notice it. He attacks Tails, who goes into hiding rather than being unconscious, fortunately, and he fortunately gets called back to the Battle Lord just in time. And after Teapup goes off like an alarm clock, because Tails conveniently thought to put that function in him off screen, he conveniently remembers what's going on in his groggy state really quickly, and gets alert right away in the next panel. They didn't set guards for Tails' workshop, which Tails lampshades as being convenient. Either way, he got really lucky that this worked out for him the way he wanted it. After Antoine lands in Tails' lap because Tails' submarine was conveniently just below him from the door above, and Tails conveniently saw him in time to put down the windshield, resurface, and catch him, as Teapup lights away with his eyes, that Tails conveniently made to glow on command for no reason. Antoine then ties them up with convenient rope that where did the rope come from? She downloaded the schematics of the base while chatting with their leader. While it sure is nice that apparently she can do that and has a pocket to keep that download thing in her cybernetics, there's a lot of convenient stuff happening in this adaptation. She can store a memory stick in a pocket in her cyborg legs now that she conveniently thought to keep with her on the vacation. She puts the information in Teapup, who conveniently is suddenly able to project a hologram of the schematics of the base. He orders some lasers to be shot at them, which they conveniently dodge just in time. Tails conveniently avoids flying right into the metal fist flying upwards in front of him out of nowhere when he had no way of knowing it was coming. Okay, I guess he should have heard it rocketing up. But there's no text indicating a sound effect. We start out with Bunny being revealed to not be knocked unconscious yet again from the robot fist, so that's a convenient relief. Suddenly, out of nowhere, it's revealed that Tails was carrying a wrench with him the whole time that is way too big to possibly have been hidden by either of them. But apparently he also took bombs and stored them in Teapup too, off-screen. Off-screen, mind you, off-screen! While Antoine's sword is apparently going to be strong enough to cut through to groups of cables in the walls of the base. For some reason, when Tails throws his wrench at the robot's exterior, and it clearly doesn't break anything off it, or hit and twists bolts at all, the robot is destroyed anyways. And Tails leads Antoine and Bunny to push through the panicking army of battlebirds rather than fly over them, and somehow this works without them getting pushed down or punched and trampled or anything, because we needed yet another convenience. Tails explains that he figured out that the island was a flying metal fortress from the schematics he got. Bunny compliments Tails because he only looked at them for 2 minutes at most. No, I'm pretty sure it's just plot convenience. I hope the reboot isn't written like this. The biggest example I noticed was Tails having a wrench and bombs out of nowhere, despite not having a backpack to hold any Tails Adventure items in, which I'd expect out of a fan-written adaptation of a game that's all about getting items. Also, I hated how Speedy acted towards Tails, even if it was revealed to be a Tsundere cover-up moment, because I wasn't given any indication at that point that he was like a tsundere. So it just looked like terribly inconsistent writing where he's showing decency in a sweet moment 1 minute, and then goes back to being a bully at the next. At the very least, it makes sense that Tails would go overboard with T-Pup and his childish excitement of technology, make him have all sorts of different functions that he doesn't seem to need at the time he's being built. That makes him make a lot more sense functioning as an all-purpose do-anything machine than Nicole. But since I don't know everything he's capable of, he's still basically a living plot convenience, being there to do whatever the plot demands for the heroes when the writer has written himself into a corner. All he has to do is invent a brand new power for him out of nowhere. Tails didn't have a Chaos Emerald to send magic into him to have so many places to store such capabilities in him. Did he use rings? It's not like the plot made no sense, but it stretched its belief, and there were a few moments of nonsensical forced comedy that prove you don't need to have puns or forced wall breaking if the comedy be forced. But with the addition of Bunny to it and dialogue, it's still way better plot than the game.